Hello everybody, Andy here from Glass Half Dead, the #1 kill team channel on the internet, unless you are aware of literally any other kill team channel. So I wanted to have a little talk today, kind of a thoughts and feelings, if you will, on the recent balanced data slate. This isn't actually going to be about kind of what's the new tier list or what's the new hot takes. It's more a question of what the hell was that, if you want to view it that way. So you might be thinking, why does my team still suck? And you might be thinking, because, hey, I got buffed, but it's not enough. Or you might be thinking, I didn't get buffed, and that's weird because everybody knows that my team needed the buff. So, how can I explain this to you? Okay, right. Here, you know what? Okay, we are going to be looking at a tier list. Let me go here quickly so that you can have something more interesting to look at than me. This is Kill Team Battle Kit. If you ever need your rules, I strongly recommend using this. It's just easier to use than the Kill Team app. It also has score tracker, blah, blah, blah. Go check it out, all good. One of the things they have here is, if you go into this little burger menu, I think that's what they call it, it gives you a tier list. This is done by the Kill Team Mercenarios, who are a Spanish podcast, I believe. They also stream stuff. Cool, there you go. That explains what this tier list is. They have already updated their tier list because, hey, if you're a content creator, you've got to be updating that tier list, because where there's tier lists, there's views. I normally say where there's news, there's views, but no. When you do a tier list, you just get more views than normal. There you go. So they've smashed it out at the park already. Great. I'm not going to be talking about their tier list and say, this is right, this is wrong. Not the purpose of this video. I want to talk about a more meta, what the hell happened to my team? Okay, or what didn't happen to my team. So obviously here I'm talking to the people, the casuals, that are just wondering why their Pathfinders or their Scouts or whatever didn't really get touched. Scouts did get touched. However, the very first response I saw in my various Discords when they were looking through all of their teams was, Scouts still suck. So, you know, perhaps, firstly, let's start with rule number 1. There are 3. You might think you weren't buffed, but actually you were. So what I want to talk about here is balance is always a meta thing, okay? For example, and we know this was true, a lot of the elite teams were gatekeeping other teams. For example, why have I just said that twice? Great start. I'm not editing it. There you go. There are certain teams that are being held in check by elite teams. And likewise, for example, I'm not saying that again in this video, to clarify. You might also find that your team has actually been buffed by the mere fact that another team has been nerfed. Or other teams have gone above them because they have been buffed. It is possible that, let's take as viewing Kassakin, perhaps they're very good at killing elites, let's say. They're not, but that's what they're supposed to be. That's kind of their thing. They don't really have much blast or torrent, really, so they're supposed to be good at killing elites. If you have elites at the top of the meta, logically, Kassakin will then be doing really quite well. If elites are not particularly strong and they're sitting in the middle, and not that many people are taking them, then Kassakin are also not going to be doing particularly well, because they will be being beaten not by elites, who they can handle, but other teams which are currently beating elites as well, holding, suppressing people playing elites. So you have this meta shifting of, if one team is better than another team, that can be good for your team. And just by the fact that you then won't have as many top players playing the team that you cannot beat, your team will be better. Okay? I think that makes sense. Emergency. I am viewing the balance patch we just got as an emergency balance patch. I think that's absolutely key to keep in mind. What I mean by this is that, okay, it wasn't rushed out. They waited the full 3 months for it, or was it 4 months? It was a long time. And total conspiracy theory, I believe that they probably smashed this balance patch out 2-3 months ago, right? They would have seen the issues, the playtesters, the devs, etc. said, okay, we've got to quickly tweak these things. Let's get that out nice and quick, bring everything up to date. But for whatever reason, they were delayed. We can tell they were delayed because every other game that GW does got updates before LVO. We didn't. Clearly, there was a technical issue. I have to assume that's the case. That meant that we didn't get ours in time. So yeah, there you go. So if you look back to what people were saying 2 months ago, we were discussing how strong elites are, blah, blah, blah. We had novitiates, we had Inquisition, we had Warp Coven, Legionary, all at the top. And these people were balancing for 2-3 months ago, not for what we have then kind of learned now. A good example of that is, I think, Felgor. I think that Felgor are an obviously strong team that only weren't dominating the meta because elites were there. Now, in the next balance patch, Felgor are going to get a nerf. There's no way it's not going to happen. They ain't catching strays, they're the target, you know? And keep that in mind, whereas if the Kill Team guys had had a little bit longer to think about the full meta as opposed to just the current meta, they probably would have just offhand nerfed Felgor because it was probably needed. We just had Blades of Cain absolutely smash a top tournament after months of people saying they suck. What does that mean? We have Mandrakes winning quite regularly, but they weren't touched. So I genuinely feel that what we had a second ago was an emergency balance patch. Now you're saying, Andy, it was an emergency that my Pathfinders got fixed because they're like the lowest win rate team. So yeah, let me explain that as well. If it was an emergency, why did they not buff more teams? So I actually agree with you on this. I think they have a lot more work to do across the board. I think it was a very, very light touch, which is fine. Like small touches to the key problems is good, but they didn't do, like they did to the big stuff, but they needed to do a lot more for a lot more teams. I think a lot more underperforming teams. And what I mean by this is the tier list. That's why we have the tier list up. If you recall who was at the top, it was what? Of this particular tier list, it was Inquisition, Novitiates, Warp Coven, Legionary, and I think for a time they did have Pyrotech Circle there, but at some point they moved them to A+. Anyway, now, if you think of this emergency balance patch, we need to bring everything into line very quickly because everybody is saying, not me, I would never say such a thing, but other people, pro gamers, you know, like the top competitive players out there, were all saying the same thing. They were all saying, and go watch those channels, they can explain themselves far better than I can, the game is broken. It is not a good meta, it is bad. We need a fix now. That's not my words, their words. I play casually, I don't know if they're right or wrong. But enough people are all saying the same thing that they probably were correct. So, why did we get the fixes that we got instead of perhaps the fixes that we wanted? Because if basically in the tier list, what is it? Trickle down fixonomics. I don't know. Everything that is at the top of the tier list breaks everything below it. So everything at S tier breaks the entire game. Everything at A+ breaks everything below it, but not the S tier. So if you think about what was on the D tier or the C tier, well, if it's a broken game, a broken meta, the top tier competitive players all say everything's broken, they're talking about up there. They're talking about the 4 teams, the 5 teams that simply cannot really be beaten if you are playing an equally skilled top tier player. You kind of have a selection of 4 teams and that's it. I think it's probably about 8 teams, but some were significantly easier to play and significantly more noticeably good. So you kind of had a top 5 teams and then 3-4 that were just messing around as like, they're probably good if we had longer to play, right? So why would you ever fix the D tier? The D tier, in an emergency balance patch, the D tier is irrelevant. Buffing Pathfinders doesn't help. Like, buffing Pathfinders doesn't fix anything else in the game. Buffing Vespid or Aquilons or Kassakin or all of these teams that wanted buffs, that doesn't change the game at all. The only way you change the game by buffing a D tier team is if you overbuff it so that it goes to the S tier and you break the game again, which is obviously not what you want to do. So, in answer to why does my kill team still suck? It's because, I don't know, just like everything I just said the past 10 minutes, I guess. I probably don't have to say everything again. But yeah, there you go. It was an emergency balance patch. Anyone that thinks this was more than that, I think just, I don't know, think deeper, you know, question things a bit more, I guess. All right, well, this has been fun. Next week, I'm going to do more videos, so check those out. If you really like what I'm doing here, do consider checking out my Patreon, where you get like minimum an hour rant every week of me just talking about hobby, games played, random thoughts, just more glass really. So that'd be cool. Have a good one.